Breaking news now. The true enemy of liberalism. Western liberal democracies have been on a moral crusade against Russian President Vladimir Putin ever since his country invaded Ukraine last year. Putin is a tyrant, dictator, despot, murderer, and corrupt official in their eyes. Ukraine, on the other hand, is a liberal democracy, whose success could serve as an unwelcome example for Putin. Never mind that Time and other Western outlets aired documentaries on Ukraine before the invasion showing that neo-Nazis control the government in Kiev. This irony would make Adolf Hitler laugh in his grave, if he has one. The word unprovoked is used to preface every discussion of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Never mind that virtually every U.S. leader has warned that expanding NATO would result in a hostile Russian reaction, including the now presidential Joe Biden when he was a senator, the current CIA director William Burns, and former Secretaries of Defense Robert McNamara, Robert Bates, and William Perry, as well as former Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger, George Kennan, etc. The German and French heads of state both made similar forecasts. In an apparent effort to spread liberal democracy in Russia, top U.S. officials, including Vice President Joe Biden and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, have publicly called for Putin's assassination and the overthrow of his government. In spite of the fact that Western attempts to export liberal democracy have resulted in the breakdown of government and increased instability, paving the way for the spread of terrorism and mass murder in places like Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Somalia, Libya, Afghanistan, etc. The International Criminal Court has indicted Putin for war crimes, so as not to be left behind in this moral crusade. The same court has ignored similar justifications, such as the responsibility to protect and spreading democracy, when U.S. leaders and their allies have launched an unprovoked invasion of some country. Putin's claims that he invaded Ukraine to remove neo-Nazis were taken directly from their playbook. However, the International Criminal Court has done nothing whenever and wherever the United States and her puppets have bombed a country, massacred civilians, or committed genocide. The International Criminal Court is obviously a tool used by the West to exert its global dominance. But this article is not about all these obvious cases of power abuse or hypocrisy. What worries me is the almost complete silencing of dissenting voices, the stifling of open debate on these issues, and the silence of Western media in the face of it all. Liberalism is a great and inspiring idea, and as an African educated in the West, I am committed to it. Any topic of public interest merits robust discussion in the hopes that more light will be shed on the many facets of that topic. This isn't done for fun, it's a tool for unearthing the facts. The media has censored any and all perspectives on Ukraine that don't portray Kiev as the victim of unprovoked aggression and Putin as the embodiment of evil. It's common to assume that anyone who disagrees with the prevailing narrative must be on Putin's payroll. Even Alphabet, Google's parent company, banned the Russian government-funded television network RT from its video sharing platform YouTube. Retired U.S. Colonel Scott Ritter's YouTube channel was recently disabled for repeating the same argument that the Ukrainians are losing to the Russians. There has been a total blackout in the Western media of any stories or information that are negative about Kiev or positive about Putin. When it comes to liberal values, the West claims to be at war with Putin but actually represses them at home. Attempts to export liberal ideals abroad, or claims thereof, often tend to undermine them at home, as I have argued repeatedly in this column. As an example, the sanctions imposed on Russia have resulted in the first significant drop in living standards in Western countries since the end of World War II. As a result, anti-liberal, far-right political parties have gained ground across Western Europe. In the final section of this column, I intend to circle back to this topic. Putin's alleged authoritarian hand in Russia is likely to strengthen for the time being as a result of Western sanctions, allowing him to suppress dissent in the name of national defense. Wow, talk about putting your foot in it. The mujahideen of the Western democracies fail to realize that the fight for freedom is never won. Great Western thinkers like Frederick von Hayek, George Orwell, and Karl Popper have always voiced concern over these dangers to individual freedom. The liberal clergy fails to recognize the historical conditions that have made Western democracy possible. Thus, they have transformed it from a political form unique to a certain era into a universal standard applicable everywhere and at any time. Liberal democracy, like all political systems, is a byproduct of its era and environment. But as current events in the West are demonstrating, the survival of liberal democracy is by no means assured. The idea that democracy in the West is here to stay is predicated on the idea that the conditions that have kept it afloat will do so indefinitely. However, recent developments have shown that to be incorrect. Since 1945, Western democracies have flourished in no small part because of the widespread prosperity that has resulted from sustained economic growth. Since 1980, the top 10% have reaped the benefits of growth, contributing to a widening income gap. Public faith in democracy is eroding as living standards continue to fall for most people in the West, with sanctions against Russia playing a major role in this. This is how Europe largely spent the years between the wars, from 1919 to 1939. Democracy has been on the decline in recent years, according to numerous studies. The 2008 financial crisis sparked these tendencies, which were exacerbated by the COVID pandemic and now find themselves in the spotlight due to the conflict in Ukraine. The European Union is expected to see growth of 0.8% this year, while the United States is predicted to see growth of 2.2% this year, falling to 0.8% in 2024. Forecasts indicate that while France's economy will expand by 0.8%, Italy's will expand by 0.9%, and the UK's will expand by 0.6%, Germany's will contract by 0.4%. This economic development poses a far greater danger to Western liberal democracy than does Putin. In order to get their economies back on track, Western leaders need to understand Russian concerns and work with Putin. My advice to the West is to examine its own shortcomings before passing judgment on the Russian president.